Always smells good. I want to talk about, I'm going to call him the one with the dog because, oh my gosh, I still miss his dog years later. He had a great dog, and why is it that the best dogs go to the weirdest people? But whatever. We met on a dating app, of course, and it started out fast and furious, I would say, with him being very clear that he wanted to dive into a relationship. And at the time, I still thought that that was a good sign that they meant that they were serious. And it probably does mean that they're serious, but it also means that they're running from something. Or they aren't secure enough in their own self as a person to just be single long enough to make sure that you guys are going to be a really good fit long term. So, I wouldn't say he was more or less like enjoyable to be around than any other person that I've decided to spend my time with. He had a very nice house. He was a very responsible person. He took care of, his life really well. He had friends. He had interests. He had hobbies. I think we dated for about 3 months, but all the things like lined up. Like I met his friends and family. Not all of them, but some of them within that time frame, and got to know some of his friends a little bit. We had these game nights and stuff, so all of that was really good. I unfortunately got COVID from him. This was back then, but not his fault. Obviously, he didn't know he had COVID that day when I was going out with him, but it came on pretty fast for him, and I was with him, so he graciously let me stay with him so that I didn't infect my children. So we each took a couch and kind of wallowed in our misery together. And the one thing I will say about him that is a very positive sign, I think, is that he could have a good time in any situation. And at least I didn't see the side of him. Now it might exist, but I didn't see a side of him where he lost his temper for any reason or even a reasonable reason. He was just a guy that could find the fun in any situation, and that's a really big turn on for me because life is hard sometimes, and there are days where you just kind of have to laugh or you'll cry. And I did appreciate that he was always finding a way to make the situation better. He was probably one of the best people I could consider being on death's bed with. COVID hit me really, really hard. He didn't rush me to get better. He was very accommodating. He was ordering food when we couldn't cook, and then ordering supplies so that we could cook for each other based on who was feeling better. He wanted to make sure I was completely healthy before I went back to see my kids. That part of him was great. And it kind of lended itself to me thinking that the rest of him would also be great. And I've had some time to think about it, and I wonder if, because hindsight kind of gives you more grace when you look back at something. And in the moment, of course, I had a very visceral reaction to what happened, and I was reacting out of a need for safety and security. I can see potentially how he could maybe have been trying to protect himself as well. The reason I walked away is that he was not willing to have a common ground conversation about the issue. And he had a friend in his life who was going through a situation that he communicated in many ways that he thought was unacceptable, and felt really bad for her, and said a reasonable man would never put a woman in that situation. Yet he turned around and was trying to put me in that situation. So the fact that he didn't have the self-awareness to understand that he was doing what he thought was unacceptable, and he wasn't willing to have a conversation about it, that is ultimately what ended it for me. And it was a pretty fast ending. Everything was humming along, and then he had decided that he wanted to move. He had had that house with, another woman and her kids, and he was just kind of wanted a fresh start, wanted something better for his dog, more land for her to run around. And he asked me to come along and check out the house. And I thought I owned my own house at that point. Obviously, we hadn't been dating very long. And I just thought, oh, he just wants to see, like, he wants company picking out the house. Well, he started asking me a lot of really pointed questions about what I would be looking for my kids and what I might want in a house. And I was uncomfortable with that. And I said, I'm not ready to move in with you yet, but we can talk about what that might look like, because I do feel it's a good idea to talk about different scenarios that may come up in the process of a relationship to see that if you guys are eye to eye on it or not. Because if you come across something that isn't going to be a good fit for either of you, wouldn't you want to know that 3 months in instead of 3 years in? So having those conversations does make sense to me. So I was willing to, like, mentally kind of explore that, but I was not up for really moving in. He was insistent though. So my spidey senses started tingling, and I was thinking, why does he want to move in so quickly? This is so weird. So I said, you know what? Let's just have the conversation with him and see where it goes. See what he says. Because one thing that my therapist taught me was there are going to be situations which lend itself to kind of like a test of what a person's character is and what their intentions are. And if you bypass it, you're going to miss out on critical information that you would need to know if you're planning to continue that relationship. So I saw clear as day that this was an opportunity for me to kind of test the waters and see what would happen. So in my conversations with him, I went all in. I said, let's talk about this. What would this look like? How would this work? What percentage of the down payment would you like me to come up with? What percentage of the down payment would you be coming up with? Like, how would the mortgage situation work? Who's signing what on what documents? And come to find out, this is what he thought was a good idea. He thought he would buy the house. It would be his house, completely his house. And he would pay all the bills. I would come in there. I would live there with my kids. And I would pay him rent, basically. He wanted me to pay rent. Mind you, rent where I live is actually more than buying a small house. So I would have wound up paying more to him. And then I also would have lost out on any investment opportunities for my future and my children's future. Okay, so at first glance, that doesn't look terrible, unless you really understand the housing market up here. It's not great, right? It's not a beautiful situation. Here's the other thing that he didn't want to discuss, is that I said he had an adult daughter. And I asked him, okay, first of all, what happens? He's like, oh, sorry, let me go back. He said I could rent out my house. I didn't have to sell it. And I said, well, yeah, I could rent it out. That's a bit of a hassle. I don't really know that I want to be a landlord. And if I did rent it out and we were to break up, there would be like a waiting period in which my kids and I would be able to actually move back in. That would be super awkward. I wouldn't have any legal rights to this space. How does that make sense? He didn't have an answer for that. And then I reminded him that he had an adult daughter. So let's just fast forward 25 years. Everything works great. But the house is not in my name, and he dies. Like, we have a great relationship. We love it, but he dies. His daughter then has the rights to that house and can technically kick us out. And I would then have lost 20 years of that investment. And where are we going to go? Not to mention, if everything goes well and I die, then where are my kids going to go? Where are they going to be? What about my financial investment that I've given for all those 20 years? Where does it go? What do they have to show for it? And I even offered to sit down with a real estate agent and talk about percentages, because I did not expect to have 50-50. I expected to have the percentage that we both invested. He absolutely refused to even have the conversation. Absolutely refused. And so, okay, that's your boundary, that you're not going to have that conversation. Well, my boundary is that I'm not going to continue a relationship with somebody that won't have a conversation that is in regards to my safety and security, especially my kids' safety and security. I left.